discussing Hurricane Laura, now a Category 4 hurricane bearing down on western Louisiana and eastern Texas. We are only hours away from landfall. We just had the most recent 8 p.m. update from the National Hurricane Center, bringing in maximum sustained winds currently of 150 miles an hour, moving north-northwest at 15 miles per hour. Unfortunately, this has been the day that we've all been dreading on social media for days, discussing. There's been discussions of rapid intensification for 3 or 4 days now, y'all. So it's here, and the storm has exploded over the last 24 hours. Central pressure is now down, I believe 937, something like 937 millibars in that general area, and still plummeting. Maximum sustained winds are still increasing. Some of the areas along the immediate coastline are looking at 15 to 20 feet of storm surge inundation. Unfortunately for the Louisiana coast, much of that area is only about 5 feet or less above sea level, and some areas are actually even below sea level. So it is going to be a long night for many folks. Lake Charles, Port Arthur, Holly Beach, many of the folks in that immediate area where the eye wall will be coming ashore can expect sustained winds near 150 miles an hour, a little bit less just inland, but nonetheless still major status. So with that, I'll bring in the panel. We have Scotty Powell, we have Frank Strait, Jared Smith, and Zachary Moss on tonight to discuss some of the ins and outs of the forecast, what we're looking at over the next 12 hours as this storm makes landfall, and also what we're looking at over the next 48 hours as this potentially pivots into the Carolinas as a much weaker storm this weekend. Panel?
Awfully quiet for there being a Category 4 hurricane in the Gulf of Mexico. A monster, to say the least.
Yeah.
And it might still intensify a little more. It could end up being a Cat 5 at landfall. I was just flipping through Twitter a little bit here. Apparently, Mike Adcock noted there's a drop zone that measured 940 at the splash location, but it was a little windy there, so extrapolating that to a little bit lower pressure around 937 from that drop zone, probably, he thinks.
Yeah, I think the silence that you hear, Frank, is all of us just a little slack jawed at the moment. Truth be told,
Right, we're all like,
this is
over shocked.
Yeah, I mean, if you look at just where we started this morning with, Laura was, certainly, had the look last night, getting getting it together, and it did what these storms in the Gulf have done repeatedly. We think of Harvey, we think of Michael, and now we think of Laura here. That's going to be just joining that class, that apparently looking to join that unfortunate class of potentially highly destructive storms moving into southeastern Louisiana.
Yep, and this is what we've been dreading for days. We knew that the conditions would be perfect for rapid intensification over the Gulf of Mexico once it got there. We knew that the shear would relax. We knew that the waters were extremely warm, pushing 90 degrees over a lot of that area, and warm to considerable depth, so there'd be some resistance to upwelling as well. And the worst case scenario is playing out here, sadly.
It's been a very tough forecast for the National Hurricane Center, but they have handled it very well. I'm going to throw up a quick cone progression animation here in a minute so you can see how the forecast cone has progressed over the last 4 to 5 days. And there's been some big variations. Just 2 days ago, we had Hurricane Marco in the Gulf as well, heading towards what we thought was Louisiana. Thankfully, the dry air got to that one, and it dwindled to a tropical storm, then depression. And it did officially make landfall near the mouth of the Mississippi. But it was virtually a non-event for most of Louisiana and Alabama and a little bit of the Florida Panhandle. But unfortunately, that left a ripe environment for what is now Hurricane Laura as it approaches for landfall in Louisiana. We also have joining us tonight, and I won't make him talk now if he doesn't want to, but we've got Shay Gibson on to help us discuss some of this. Guys, I think one of the biggest concerns tonight, one obviously is wind, and that's kind of a given with the category 4, category 5 classification. That's based on wind speeds, but there's also a huge, just unbelievable storm surge threat tonight. Even outside, you were throwing around these numbers, 15 to 20 feet. That could potentially 10 to 20 feet of storm surge could potentially penetrate 30 miles inland in some areas, which is it's hard to fathom.
When the National Weather Service uses words like unsurvivable, they don't use those words just because they want clicks. They use those words because they mean it. And
Correct. Right. When
they
they use words
absolutely
like
mean
that,
it.
they're trying to say we're not playing around here. This is serious business.
Yeah. Yeah. They mean it. This is this area is about as susceptible to storm surge as you get. I mean, it doesn't get much more susceptible to it here. And then you're going to combine that with an intensifying hurricane. Looks like right up to landfall, we're still seeing lightning in the eye, in the eye wall there. You know, and Evan has got, it looks like, so Evan's got the storm surge map up. And
Yeah. So this is the areas in red are going to be your locations that are expecting more than 9 feet of storm surge inundation. Remember, this is 9 feet above ground level, not just 9 feet from where the water normally is, but 9 feet above the ground. And unfortunately, there's some city centers in this. Lake Charles is quite a populated area, and if we zoom in here, this is from the National Hurricane Center, an experimental product, but nonetheless quite useful in events like this. It's easy to see why we're so concerned about storm surge. Areas like Lake Charles and the city part of Lake Charles, not just the urban or the outskirts of it, but even interior Lake Charles is expecting 9+ feet of water on the ground there. Now, dating back to even the late 1800s, Lake Charles has had a series of big flood events, both storm driven and freshwater driven. Not, it hasn't always been storm surge. Previously, and actually still currently, the current record maximum gauge level at Lake Charles was somewhere around 13 feet, I believe, back in 1913. And we are expected to break that tonight. I believe the new forecast is up to 15.6 feet in Lake Charles. Back in 1913, when that current record was set, it was reported by the National Weather Service that half of the city was underwater. With another 2 feet on top of that, we could be looking at even more destruction.
And Evan, I think that was, I think this is based off of the SLR viewer, the sea level rise viewer under the vulnerability scale. And so I'm looking at the same map. I looked at this last night when they started going up in feet, and the mean high water mark at 10 feet was significant. I mean, going in 20, 30, 40 miles, it's pretty insane. I mean, if you go even further up, if you look at the scale, you're even going further up, 50, 60 miles.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you guys can see here on the map for those that are watching, and I know we'll have a few podcast listeners listening, so they can't see this, but like Shay said, we do have storm surge penetrating even 50, 60 miles inland. Flashing back to Hurricane Michael, the last Category 5 to make landfall in the United States, there was devastation. Places like Mexico Beach, where the storm surge pushed into the double digits as the hurricane made landfall. But we didn't see storm surge penetrating 30, 40 miles inland. Louisiana is a very different area, and specifically in terms of elevation and the amount of bayous and swamps and low elevation areas that are here that are going to be impacted. So unfortunately, these impacts are going to be potentially even more significant or just as significant as Hurricane Michael. And just like Michael, this storm is intensifying right up and into landfall.
Yeah. And to put this scale in perspective a little bit here, Lake Charles is a little over 30 statute miles from the Gulf of Mexico. So that gives you an indication if the storm surge is penetrating north of there. I mean, there's an entire county, or rather parish, in Louisiana. There's an entire parish in between Lake Charles and the Gulf of Mexico, and another half of one, Calcasieu Parish, where Lake Charles is located. So it's just insane to think about how deeply or how far inland this storm surge is going to penetrate and cause problems. A lot of this area is going to be underwater for a little while.
Yeah, I'm really amazed at how fast Laura is moving. I think right now is in around like 15 miles an hour. It's just an amazing driving force. Unlike many hurricanes that have impacted the coast and especially the Gulf. And its direct impact is just making a storm surge a huge probable danger for many people.
Yeah, I mean, we look back to Ike and Rita,
Right.
two big name storms on the coast, on the Gulf Coast, with huge storm surge values. Both of those had a very quick forward motion. On the opposite end of the spectrum, we had Harvey just 4 years ago now. That was very slow moving. So this is a very, very different storm from Harvey, just as dynamic. But we're still looking at, I believe rainfall totals up to 12 inches. I'll get an updated map on that and we'll share it here in a second. But I believe we're still looking at rainfall totals up to a foot along areas along the center line, basically, of the storm. If the eye wall is going to pass over you, that's kind of the rainfall range we're looking at. But thankfully, because of that quick forward motion, we don't have to worry about as much precipitation falling. But there's pluses and minuses that comes with more storm surge. So absolutely right, Zachary.
Yeah, and you're going to have some other minuses too, in that you're going to have further inland penetration of the stronger winds. You're going to have hurricane force winds, 60, 70, 80 miles inland. You're going to have, you're going to have a very wide swath of heavy rainfall going well into the center part of the country. And don't forget that this is going to get caught up in the westerlies, and this is going to turn towards the East Coast later this week, obviously in a much weaker state, but we may be talking about Laura for a few days left. I mean, you can see that the inland penetration of that is going to be quite, it's going to be quite something. And I think something that we haven't touched on yet is the fact that, there's been a pretty decent tornado outbreak today, down just in that northeast quadrant there. There are 4 active tornado warnings right now too. So you're going to spread this threat for severe weather northward. You're going to spread this threat for heavy flooding rainfall northward, and you're going to spread hurricane force winds, and hurricane force gusts, into southern Arkansas, it looks like, based off of this model projection here, which is certainly possible. So we'll have to see, but we'll have to see how this goes. But these fast movers, as we saw with Michael, they can pack quite a punch well inland.
Yeah, absolutely.
Which, by the way, notice those wind speeds in the mountains there of western North Carolina. That's one of the things I'm highlighting in my forecast outlook here tonight, is that while with a hurricane, the surface winds die off, and sometimes fairly quickly, not necessarily in this case, because you'll see hurricane force winds maybe in Arkansas, but aloft, those winds are still going. Even sometimes days later, and we'll still have those winds occurring at 2,000, 3,000, 4,000 feet, fairly strong winds occurring at that level as Laura moves into Virginia and North Carolina on Saturday. And so when those winds intersect the higher elevations, you get those stronger winds there. And so this actually looks like a reasonable idea to me, that there could be 50-mile-an-hour wind gusts in the mountains in North Carolina, and to get breezy to windy, maybe not damaging winds, even outside the mountains in North and South Carolina.
Yep, that's absolutely. It's a good point, Frank. I was going to say the forecast outlook is pretty strong. West, southwest winds all the way down towards the Charleston, South Carolina coast. Even we could get moderate to strong winds here. Of course, stronger as you get up through southeastern North Carolina and the Outer Banks towards the Mid-Atlantic. Depends on where the track of the system goes. Now, if it goes a little bit further north, those winds will not be as strong. But the southerly quadrant of the system, as it goes through, even as a depression, is still going to be drawing a lot of convergence up through the Gulf. So you may have some, maybe looking at some isentropic lift over those mountainous zones, maybe some additional rains and storms if the ridge continues the heating process. So it looks like unsettled weather across this whole area for the next few days.
Yes, that's problem 2 of 3, by the way, to deal with in the Carolinas, starting late Friday night and into Saturday in the mountains as Laura starts to move through. We're going to get a period of heavy rain. Now, thankfully, Laura's going to be trucking along at a pretty good clip still, so the duration of the heavy rain won't be extreme, but there's been a lot of rain in the North Carolina mountains, 2 to 3 times normal rain over the last 30 days, and so there's going to be some concern for flooding.
Yeah.
Definitely so. I wanted to bring up this one thing right quick. Our friend out in the field, Mark Sudduth, showing these pictures out of this is Cameron, Louisiana, and so this is right along the coast here. Mark deploys these. He was on the show last year. It's like GoPros and this like almost stormproof casing that he deploys out in various areas as these hurricanes are approaching. As you can see here, guys, I mean, we're still away from the main part of the storm moving in, and we've already got it surge. That looks to be at least a couple of feet of surge already inundating the roadway here, and we're still a couple of hours out from the heaviest stuff moving in. So we had reports earlier today, as early I think it's about 5 o'clock, of some storm surge issues already, and that was well in advance of Laura making an approach there on the Louisiana coast. So just monitoring Twitter there. Just wanted to bring that up while you guys are discussing. Already seeing some storm surge issues in portions of Louisiana.
We've got a couple of deployable weather stations that the University of Florida works with us on. Sometimes the University of Texas Tech will deploy, but we have 2 from UF, and we're trying to get those. One's being redeployed. We have T1 and T5, so I'll be sharing that information out as the storm comes ashore. So they're trying to strategically locate them where they may be able to capture some of the eye wall. But the problem here is you can't really add instrumentation anywhere near the coastline, because if it's going to be 15 to 20 feet underwater, it's whatever it is going to get swept away. So those have to be refocused inland, but we're hoping to catch some data right along the wall. The data is fairly sparse in that area. We don't have a lot of coastal information. We have 1 station nearby, but that's a 10-meter pole. We hope that one survives it. But yeah, I mean, there's not a lot of saturated or dense data in that area, so it's going to be hard to tell. I mean, outside the hurricane hunters, what's actually going on at the very surface versus an 850 millibars up and down to the surface. So should be interesting, fellas. This is a monster of a storm.
Yeah, and Evan, you and I were talking before. You don't really want, and I see we just got the new 8 p.m. Central Time, 9 p.m. advisory out. Wasn't able to look at that, so maybe one of you guys can. But we were looking at in this track, some of these areas that are going to be affected tonight were affected by Hurricane Rita back in 2005. Evan, you was looking at a similar path. I think it was Camille in 69, I believe is what you're showing.
Camille. Yeah, so Camille back in 1969 made landfall a little bit further east in eastern Louisiana. Violent storm there, and it did track north, and just like the storm that we're seeing now, got caught in the westerlies and pulled off to the east through western Virginia, not west, but western Virginia, and off the Atlantic coast where it re-strengthened. That's definitely a situation that could very likely unfold with Laura, and it's something we haven't really talked about here or on social media, but there is potential for Laura to re-strengthen off of the east coast. At that point, it'll be moving away from shore, so it'll be a fish storm, as we like to call it. But for now, it's not a fish storm, and unfortunately, those impacts are very real and very imminent.
Yep. I've got the tropical cyclone update right here, guys. So this is the position update from 8 o'clock. They, I guess we're not doing a intermediate today. They're doing the position update. So 8 o'clock is 95 miles south of Lake Charles, 95 miles south-southeast of Port Arthur, Texas. Max sustained winds remain at 150 miles an hour, moving north-northwest at 15 miles per hour. Minimum pressure down to 937 millibars. So the Hurricane Center highlighting the tornado threat ongoing in the northeast quadrant. On that update, we'll get a full fix. If it hasn't made landfall yet, we get a full fix at 11. So it's yeah, Shay's got it up. He's got the shortwave infrared up, and you can see with the GLM, you see a lot of lightning still happening in that eye wall, and that just screams continued intensification to me.
Yeah, notice the tornado warned areas as well. Notice how quick they are. A lot of these tornado warned areas, in most cases with tropical systems, they're coming ashore, and these outer bands and squalls are carrying these low areas of rotation. And so you have all these tiny little mesovortices, these small areas of rotation that pop up, and they are radar indicated tornadoes. Well, some of them actually do make contact with land. Some of them are radar indicated, but you never know which ones are actually going to be making contact. So I'm expecting to see a lot more of this along the eastern flank of the system, and also pressing further up into Arkansas and portions of the Midwest. So I would expect to see a lot more tornado warnings popping up, and probably even a little bit more severe as the storm heads north.
Yeah, I
Speaking
think
of
you're
warnings, guys, I think it's important to talk about extreme wind warnings because that may not be a topic that a lot of people are familiar with. It's a very, very, very rare warning that comes from the National Weather Service, and it is defined as uh, if you get put under an extreme wind warning, you are expected to experience 115-mile-per-hour winds within 1 hour of that warning being issued. We've seen this with Matthew in the past and a couple of other storms. This only happens in the most severe of cases, and likely, depending on how the National Weather Service decides to handle this, but we could be seeing one of those issued later tonight for locations near the immediate coast and potentially even a little ways inland. So if you see that, that is what it's defined as. Don't be confused, but it is absolutely to be taken seriously.
The extreme wind warning was born of a little guerrilla warning tactics by the Weather Service was it Melbourne or Tampa? I can't remember. I think it was Melbourne during Hurricane Charlie in 2004 when they somewhat unexpectedly, somewhat suddenly had Hurricane Charlie strengthening very quickly and barreling through the Florida Peninsula. And they needed a way to get warnings out to the people who were there. There wasn't time to organize an evacuation, so everyone was sheltering in place. They needed a way to get warnings to there, so they issued a tornado warning. That was the only way to activate NOAA weather radio. That was the only way to activate the EAS. That was the only way to get the word out. Obviously, it wasn't a tornado, but they were treating it as a giant tornado. And so, after maybe a couple hands got slapped and things like that, Weather Service went back and evaluated it and realized, actually this is a good idea. So thus the extreme wind warning was born, and hadn't seen, it's a very rare product, probably one of the most rare products issued by Weather Service office. Had it described to me by several forecasters as the button they never want to push and warn Jen. And unfortunately, it does appear that button will be pushed tonight, maybe a couple times as this barrels northward. Again, that eye wall, just kind of recapping where it is, again, we're within 90 miles of Lake Charles. And again, that's a little more inland, using radar scope's measurement tool, which I, fully understand may not be completely accurate, but that eye wall, that outer edge of that eye wall is within 50 miles of the coast now. So if it's going to continue to go downhill very quickly, and, we're going to see, we're going to start to see a lot of weather stations, disappear off the map. I think that's going to be something that is concerning. And in fact, Lake Charles, the weather forecast office, they're evacuated this morning. They were evacuated. They've shut down the WFO and they've dispersed the forecasters to, I want to say they moved them into New Orleans and maybe a couple other offices. So the Lake Charles Weather Service, again, KLCH, the radar there. I think that, the odds of KLCH making it through the night are not good. That eye wall is pointed directly at it, and we're going to get some very interesting shots out of there tonight. But it's very possible that we may lose radar coverage from that as well. And hopefully their office is all right. But I think that underscores the point. The fact that the National Weather Service evacuated this morning really means that if you have the means and we have the ways to do it, get out of there. There are a lot of people who don't have the means to get out of there. And my thoughts are with them tonight, as they do their best to stay safe and hopefully it does as forecast and passes quickly.
And Jared, to piggyback off that, the local TV stations in Lake Charles also evacuating to, I believe, Baton Rouge, over to New Orleans, places like that. So they're also heading out of town.
That's a great point, Scotty, and a good way maybe for us to begin to wind this down a bit. But if you're looking for live coverage of this storm, if you're that in Lake Charles or that local, you may not be able to tune into your local station because, as Scotty just said, they have actually evacuated. There are national syndicates. You can watch the Weather Channel. You can tune into Weather Nation. You can tune into most likely any news outlet this evening they will be covering it live. Your local National Weather Service office and the National Hurricane Center are going to be your two go-to locations for official forecast data and current wind speed data, as well as warning information. If you have a weather radio, turn it on because you're probably going to lose power if you're in this path of this storm. And if your phone's not fully charged or you don't have enough signal, you're not going to get that warning. So crank that radio up and make sure that you can hear it. even if you're not near the center, if you're out near the edges, there's still a tornado threat and a flood threat. So make sure you have ways to get these warnings, to stay covered and to stay safe throughout the night. Panel, anything else that we want to toss in here before we begin to wrap up?
I want to show this one picture, and again, this was a couple hours ago. Hopefully, you guys can see this. This is from one of the parishes, and you can already see. Again, this, I think it was 6:33, so a couple of hours ago, and you can already see the waves coming across the roads, and this is only going to get worse as the night continues. So very dire situation going on, and I think you guys already covered it. The Hurricane Center said, this is, you're not going to be able to survive in this storm surge, and I think when the sun rises tomorrow, we'll see some really crazy shots out of or get some really crazy reports out of these areas in Louisiana.
Definitely.
Scotty, I'd love to read one tweet before we wrap up tonight, because it seemed so potent earlier that I sent it to our internal chat. And it's from Josh Morgerman, who many people know as a top tier hurricane chaser. He's likely been in the eye of more tropical cyclones than any human on this planet ever. He's a pro at this. And he tweeted earlier, and actually I'll share my screen so you guys can read along with me if you'd like. But he said, I have a rule. Don't tell other chaser dudes what to do. I'm a bad mentor. Going to break that rule today. Do not play games with Laura. It's a large, intense hurricane at night over marshlands, and it's dangerous. If chasing Michael gave you confidence, lose it. This one's different. And that, in the weather community, those words carry a lot of weight. To hear Josh Morgerman giving out that kind of a warning is heavy. And we're hearing the same exact conversation from the National Hurricane Center, from other official outlets. It's large, it's dangerous, and it's going to be a killer, unfortunately.
And to add to that, Evan, Josh just tweeted a little while ago that the front desk at his hotel called him in his room to tell him, due to the nature and severity of the system, we are asking you to ride this out in your bathtub, or you can join some of us in the stairwell. Wow. So, yep, that's hotel management. They're doing the best they can, and they're pretty, he's not right there along the coast either. He's inland. He's around the Lake Charles area. So him and Reed Timmer and even our buddy Chris Jackson is doing some live coverage tonight. I think Chris put some cams up to catch some of the flooding around town down there. And so we'll see what happens. But we're going to see some pretty crazy things tonight.
Yeah, if Josh is running from it, if Josh is inland, that tells you everything you need to know about this storm. And he's been through, give you a general idea about Josh Morgerman. He's been through the worst of the worst. He flies all over the world for these things. He went out to Saipan for Typhoon Haiyan. He went out to, he's everywhere. From Michael to, just everywhere. So to hear him say that, the gravity of that, and from a very experienced chaser who we've gotten very worried about several times, most recently in Dorian, that carries a lot of weight. And I really, really hope that people have been, doing their best to heed those warnings. And again, I feel for the people who can't leave. And that is what I'm most worried about tonight as I sit here, is the people who don't have the means, they didn't have the ways to get out of there, or, people, you can say it until you're blue in the face, but sentiment often overrides a lot of things. And there's going to be people who do that. And I just, I really, 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 I have them in my thoughts tonight, and I hope for the best for them, because this is as bad as it gets. And that's just the bottom line.
Jared, I can't remember. It was one of the nightly news organizations. I was catching it while eating dinner, and it was a lady in a wheelchair, and she said, I have no family here, and I literally rode on the road several miles to get to a high school gymnasium, and this was in near the Lake Charles area. And I'm watching the Weather Channel up above, and they're showing the storm surge map, and it's showing 6 to 9, 12 feet of storm surge even flowing up into the Lake Charles area. So it's going to be utter devastation. I'm afraid when this is over with.
Yeah, Lake Charles is not safe.
Nope.
30 miles inland is not going to cut it.
Now, the one that I got from today that kind of had an impact on me, I know Evan had one, but Stephen Jamais, he's actually a seismologist here in Charleston. But he posted this today. It's just Holly Beach, Louisiana, with Hurricane Rita in 2005, and you can see what the before and after shots were. So we saw this with Michael as well over by Panama City Beach and those areas, but you can just see when that water goes completely over the island, very, very few houses are left standing out of everything that's there. And so this is probably what we're going to be seeing this round as well, with even maybe even possibly a higher surge. This was a 15-foot plus surge. So that's that had a kind of an impact on me today. Going, wow, I remember the Michael shots too, and it's no joke.
And one thing we haven't even talked about is we're in the COVID pandemic as well, and just you've got the COVID pandemic going on. You've got Louisiana, one of the hardest hit states with that, anyways, and now you've got this catastrophic hurricane bearing down on you, and just the emergency management and emergency officials, just how far stretched they are. I mean, it's our thoughts are with you all, and we hope for the best, and just hopefully everyone was able to get out of the way as much as possible as Laura, on final approach to making landfall.
One final comment I'd like to make. I know that in the wake of the storm, a lot of people are going to want to help, especially people that live nearby but aren't directly affected. Keep in mind that if you just go to the scene and show up and try to help that way, you're probably just going to get in the way. If you have special skills to offer, there's channels you can find to help out. So use the channels rather than just go and end up getting in the way and getting yourself hurt and causing more problems. So don't be what they call an emergent volunteer. Help out the right way. And if you don't have the special skills but still want to help, look for ways to contribute through charities or something like that.
Definitely. So we'll keep track on our social media. We'll tweet out some stuff. This isn't the Carolinas, so we won't be doing wall-to-wall coverage as we would for something that would be off our coast, but we will keep track of it and keep you guys informed, and we appreciate you watching tonight. Just thoughts and prayers for everyone in Louisiana and Texas, and as Frank and Evan talked about and Shay earlier, we do anticipate a little bit of impacts here in the Carolinas over the weekend with some gusty winds, maybe some heavy rain, but nothing like what our friends are going to be seeing down there in the Louisiana area. So just prayers for those folks, and we appreciate you watching tonight here on the Carolina Weather Group. We'll be back next Wednesday night with another episode. Until then, have a great weekend, and again, prayers for those folks in Louisiana and Texas tonight.